Good evening and welcome to Nashville. I'm Alan Jackson. For the past 5 years, we've been told to follow the science. But when we pull back the veil on this just a bit, we've found that our healthcare system's broken. The general public has almost lost all faith in hard science. They're mutilating our children in the name of science on our watch. So now we find ourselves in a place where corporate greed has dominated healthcare instead of patient-first care. And the results are there are a lot of chronic diseases. Well, as Bobby Kennedy explains, it's not for a lack of resources.
76.4% of Americans are suffering a chronic disease. And my uncle was president, it was 11%. In 1950, it was 3%. And we're the sickest country in the world. We have the highest chronic disease burden of any country in the world. And yet we spend more on healthcare than any country in the world.
Well, with us tonight, the White House official who's helping spread the word on making America healthy again. Senior White House advisor, Calley means. Welcome to our show, sir.
Thanks, Alan.
You know, as good as things may be, the average lifespan in some other countries, Japan and Switzerland, for example, is 83 to 84 years. That's 5 to 6 years longer than our country. Now, I realize that there's no simple answer, but let's start by giving us an overview of what you've called a healthy awakening.
Well, I think we have a existential moment right now where there's such a bright future ahead, and I think so much room for optimism. But we are at a precipice for American health. When you back up right now, today, children in America have the highest rates of pediatric cancer, the highest rates of pediatric prediabetes, the highest rates of pediatric cardiology issues, the highest rates of autism, the highest rates of autoimmune conditions. You can go down the list. The highest rates of any children of any society in human history today in America. And it's actually a pronounced difference than other countries. We have, by some measures, 6 times more childhood obesity than other developed countries, 8 times more childhood prediabetes. So there's something happening in America. And I think what Bobby Kennedy and President Trump are bravely pointing out is why is the medical system, which has done great things, which should be celebrated, but their central argument is let's trust the status quo. Let's trust the medical groups. Let's trust the academic research paradigm. Let's trust the pharma companies. That's essentially what their argument is. And we're trying to unwind that a little bit. And I think these things are coming to the forefront. You know, the American Academy of Pediatrics, which you can get disbarred. You can lose your license as a pediatrician if you go against them. They say gender affirming care is appropriate for 2-year-olds. They say that the first food a child should eat is ultra processed food. They say that you are essentially a war criminal for questioning, you know, the 70, 80 shots that a child has to take no matter what. And again, there's great medical miracles that have happened, but we've lost our way a little bit when these groups, which are foundationally funded by corporate interests. The lifeblood of the American Academy of Pediatrics is pharma. So we're not saying, you know, throw everything out, but we are saying, and I think this is being in the administration, Alan, and seeing this, it's really an invitation for a mature, nuanced conversation where at the end of the day, we're trying to talk about more root cause items like nutrition, like addressing over medicalization for children, which is a real problem, about sunlight, about prayer, mindfulness. We're trying to bring these core concepts back into the conversation and trying to lead a revolution in patient empowerment. That's what we're trying to do. It's messy, but I think that conversation is getting out there, and I think it's a positive thing.
Well, it's worthwhile, and clearly you've got a tough job trying to communicate what the best health practices are right now when trust in government health issues bottomed out during the COVID years. Then there's the old food pyramid that turned out not to be so accurate, plus all the advertising and conflicting information on diets. What are you doing to create a better bond with people who just want to know where the truth is?
The foundational assumptions in this administration is that Americans want to be healthy. They want their children to be healthy, but we've lost our way on medical guidelines and recommendations, and then the incentives of our food and medical system. So let me take those one by one. On the medical recommendations, people listen to experts, and the food pyramid, which sets the culture of nutrition in the country, which actually informs school lunches, military food, you know, a lot of actually procurement flows from the food guidelines. We're still in 1992 with the food pyramid. We still recommend added sugar as a healthy part of a 2-year-old's diet. The food guidelines right now from the government do not take a stance on ultra processed food. They say that essentially junk food can be healthy for children. It literally says that. It demonizes meat. It says grains are still essentially at the base of the pyramid. These are a tool of corporate capture that have influenced our culture that the medical system has not spoken out about, and that has real problems. So we're reforming those, and I think that's really important. And then I think this co-opted medical guidance, both on nutrition and in our standard of care for health, which says gender-affirming care is okay for 2-year-olds, which says that an obese 6-year-old should get Ozempic instead of eat healthy, which says that SSRIs should be immediately prescribed to any teenage girl that has anxiety. The medical guidelines have been corrupted to a large degree, and that flows to how we incentivize, how we spend money. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to change the guidelines, bring them more in line with science. You're going to see that with the nutrition guidelines. You're going to see that with us taking on the American Medical Association and actually having sane health guidance. And then that eventually flows into the money. So you see us taking soda and candy off of food stamps, enabling more flexibility with where patients can spend their money so they're not just gone straight to the drug for their children, but actually can invest more in things like root cause, nutrition advice, things like that. So that's the paradigm of how we're trying to change this.
Well, those medical recommendations are important because if the doctors violate those, their licenses are at risk. They're at risk of legal activity. So what's recommended really does matter, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this is why I think Dr. Oz is so important. He took over this organization that most people don't even know about called CMS. That group that Dr. Oz leads has a 2 times larger budget than all defense and intelligence spending. It's over $2 trillion. It's actually the largest single department of any government in the world. It's the biggest department in the US government. And they set the standards for medical spending, for medical care, essentially enshrine what the doctor says to you at the office. And they outsource their thinking to medical groups right now, like the American Academy of Pediatrics, like this gynecology group that's saying every pregnant mom should take Tylenol without even thinking. And there's real corruption there. These groups that they outsource thinking to are pharmaceutical front groups. So that's the great legacy accomplishment that's going to happen in the next 4 years is we're really taking power away from this top-down thinking and trying to return more power to patients. And we believe that if there's the right incentives for people to be curious about their health, to work with their doctor on a personalized solution and not be under the thumb of top-down mandates, that Americans are going to make better decisions and be healthier. But that a lot of that goes through reforming the standard of care at CMS, which is happening.
We had a health official on from the Heritage Foundation, and they made the point that it was big tobacco companies who bought into the food industry when tobacco use declined. And she said that some of our food may be enhanced in such a way that people get more addicted to it with little consideration of whether it's good for you. Is there anything you can add to that conversation?
Absolutely. This is where I think the conversation about ultra-processed food really comes into play. Now, this is a free country, and people should be able to, I think, do kind of whatever they choose, but they should have the right information. And ultra-processed food is a real problem. So right now, 70% of a child's diet is what's defined as ultra-processed food. That's about 10% in places like France and Spain. So in European countries, they're eating 90% whole food for kids. Now it's 30%. And what is the importance of that? The importance is exactly as you said, the ultra-processed food industry was created by the cigarette industry. Literally, in 1990s, 40% of the U.S. food supply was owned by cigarette companies. And they very strategically took scientists that were making cigarettes addictive to weaponize our food, to study how food can be less satiating, make you want to eat more, hijack your brain. And food companies outwardly say this today. There's actually food companies bragging that they're studying the new Ozempic shot that makes you want to eat less on how to out-hack that shot. So even if you're taking that shot to make you want to eat less, you'll still eat more. That's the type of research these companies do. So when you look at the label of your kid's food with all those ingredients you can't pronounce, those chemicals are science experiments to make the food more palatable, to make you want to eat more, to hijack your brain. And I do mean hijack your brain. You never see people overeat grass-fed steak and broccoli. We evolutionarily have grown up, and evolved with these foods, and there's natural signals that make us not overeat it. But we absolutely can overeat this ultra-processed food that's now the majority of our diet. So for starters, we should just be recommending and ringing the alarm bell about this and knowing what's in our food, studying it, and working to phase out harmful chemicals. Because right now we have thousands of chemicals in our food that are banned in every other developed country. So yes, ultra-processed food is a real problem, a real public health threat that we are taking on.
Calley, can you stay with us for another segment?
Absolutely.
We need to take a short break. If you have any thoughts on how we can get healthy again, you can send me an email at ajnow.com. It all helps. We'll be right back. We're back now with a White House senior advisor on making America healthy again, Calley Means. The president and his health team have put a priority on figuring out the rise in the causes of autism. They pointed to a report that showed some association between the use of acetaminophen and autism. Listen to the Assistant Secretary for Health, Dr. Dorothy Fink.
It's hard to hear information that challenges the status quo. We are sharing this information not to confuse, but to empower parents to make the best choices when taking medications during pregnancy. We are all concerned about the rising rates of neurodevelopmental disorders, including autism. President Trump and Secretary Kennedy are dedicated to radical transparency.
Now, I don't think anyone would argue with emphasizing better research. But right now, pregnant women and their doctors have to straddle how to deal with fevers versus preliminary information that acetaminophen could prove to be harmful to an unborn child. How do you deal with transparency and best practices at the same time?
It's a great question. What is very pronounced and clear as Secretary Kennedy's extraordinary team has come into HHS is that there's a predominant theory that patients are like infant children, and we need to be really careful to not confuse them or scare them with information. And that, it goes back to Dr. Fauci admitting that masking had no scientific evidence, but people are too stupid to realize any nuance. So we need to tell everyone to mask and actually not let the science out. It goes back to COVID era thinking. And what this autism press conference really represented at a macro level, and what this administration is trying to do is say, we're going to treat patients like adults. We don't think moms are scared or confused by more information. We think they're scared and confused why autism rates are skyrocketing among kids. And the way to restore trust and the right way to, I think, rejuvenate health in America is to give information when we have it. And that's what this Tylenol information was. Tylenol itself, the company said pregnant women should not take the product. Harvard, and they're saying Harvard is now misinformation, but the dean of the public health school of Harvard led a study, which was a meta-analysis of every study ever conducted on the link between Tylenol and autism, and said it's very clear there's a link. And the dean of Harvard, the public health school, said he thinks there's a causal link. There's more research that's come out. There's a clear concern. We're not saying this is everything. We're not saying this is a panacea. We're not saying this is the foundational root of autism, but it's clear data. It seems to be related. It's information patients should know. So President Trump and Bobby Kennedy, instead of listening to the public health deep state saying we shouldn't release information, they got in front of a microphone and let patients know that. And they let patients know that there's potentially be a folate receptor issue that there's no new therapeutic for. And they let patients know that the NIH is going to be investing $50 million to figure out other solutions, other causes, and turn over every stone possible, and not be bullied to not ask questions. This is a true transformation in healthcare culture. I think it should be celebrated. And it's a stake in the ground that this administration is going to turn public health into treating Americans like adults and not infantilizing them and thinking that they can't handle more information.
Well, that sounds like following the science to me.
That is science.
Prescription drugs are higher here than other parts of the world. Can you tell us what's being done to address those prices and if people should expect them to come down in the months ahead?
President Trump is very heated about this. There are leading drugs in the United States where our country helps, fund the R&D and leads the R&D to create these drugs that we spend 10 times more than European countries on the exact same drug. It's insane. And we are the biggest buyers of drug in the country. It's indefensible. I've met with pharma leaders. President Trump said he's met with pharma leaders. They try to spend hours explaining why we're paying 10 times more and getting ripped off. There's no explanation for this. So what President Trump's done is he's assembled his team and he said, we're going to fix this. We're going to fix this the hard way or the easy way, but we're going to fix this. It's a top priority for him. And I think you'll be seeing some very exciting announcements coming very soon. And President Trump's made very clear we are going to equalize our prices with other developed countries, which is just the fair thing to do.
Bobby Kennedy was able to get a lot of movement on the issues that included better food coloring and food dyes. I'm wondering what other health issues you might be tackling next.
This is crucial. So the food dyes, and this is a very popular issue that, they're in 60% of our children's food. The petroleum-based food dyes banned in every other country. We're getting those out. But that's just the start of the reform of the FDA GRAS standards, which is happening this year. And what that does is it gives the FDA an ability to research and understand what's in our food. Until this year, the food industry self-policed and was able to add chemicals into our food supply without even telling the government, without even showing research. So we're simply making food companies produce research before adding new chemicals in our food. And the government now has more power to do studies on existing chemicals in our food supply. This is a big, big deal. There's only a couple hundred chemicals allowed in European food. There's 10,000 allowed in our food. And it's conservative. It's bipartisan, in my opinion. This is just having transparency into what's in our food. And if there's a ingredient linked to neurological developmental issues with kids, we want to know that and have the opportunity to take action. So that's a big, big deal right now. Just real quickly, we're also going to be revamping food labeling to give Americans more transparency to what's in their food. And I will just highlight again, releasing the updated dietary guidelines this year, which are going to have a big impact to the food that's served at schools and the food that's served at military bases, and I think just general American culture. The message is going to be, we got to get back to whole food and away from highly processed food.
Well, Calley, means this is a hopeful conversation. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you come back as these things progress a bit.
Anytime, Alan. Thank you.
In a moment, I'll be back with something that will sustain you more than food, and that's hope. Now, when you look at the legacy news media, and you can pick the topic, the common thread is fear. Fear that the economy is collapsing, or our savings will be wiped out. Fear that ICE is going to come knocking on doors and dragging away people who are here legally, citizens. It's illogical. So it comes as no surprise when the media is quick to discredit the administration's fresh approach in tackling chronic disease, obesity, or autism. We're living in a time where manipulation and deception seem to be the coin of the realm. This current season reminds me a great deal of 2020 when we faced the pandemic. The CDC stated emphatically to follow the science. What gave me pause was science doesn't change at a state line. The science in Tennessee should be the same as the science in California or the science in New Jersey, and it clearly wasn't being presented that way. I listened when Dr. Fauci began to make statements that were not accurate with what I was watching happen in the midst of the people with whom I was doing life. This is the same Dr. Fauci who once stated, and I quote, "Attacks on me are quite frankly attacks on science." Well, as we watch the legacy media fawn over Fauci, holding him up as a hero, bestowing upon him celebrity status, I'm grateful for the fresh approaches that are being taken by this administration toward better physical health. Knowing full well they'll be criticized by the media, I'm grateful for their willingness to challenge the status quo, because the status quo is not working. Our nation has a chronic disease crisis. So I have a question for us. Are we also willing to take a fresh assessment of our lives and make changes towards better physical and spiritual health? Most of us understand the basics for physical health, spiritual health. Are we willing to do what we know? If we'll do that, it's not on the government's assignment, it's ours. That will bring hope to all of our lives. When we return, I'll read some of your emails. Thank you for taking the time to send your emails. They are always a highlight of the program. Nellie from Pennsylvania commented, with Charlie Kirk's assassination, it has become very apparent that some megachurches and churches in our communities are not even speaking up about it. We are all devastated, yet they say nothing. Well, Nellie, you're right. It seems to me that there's a broad group of churches and others that are desperately trying not to notice what happened to Charlie Kirk and what's happening in our culture. There was a shooting of police officers yesterday just enforcing the laws. We're going to have to pay attention. Something's happening amongst us, and it's not the right thing. We're going to have to use our voices. It's time to wake up. Harlan from Michigan wrote in. He said, it seems to me that recognizing a Palestinian state is the ultimate anti-Semitism. Great show, even though I think you're often talking to the choir. Mostly you agree with our thoughts. Well, Harlan, once in a while, even the choir needs a good message, so I don't think it hurts to reinforce principles that are valuable to all of us. Thank you for your emails and your time today. It's always a delight to spend a few minutes together. I'm Alan Jackson, and you have a wonderful evening.